What's up my loves, my name is Paige, this is Paige is the Page, and today we're going to be doing my November wrap up. Hello my darlings, welcome to this video. Today we're going to be talking through the books that I read in November, and holy patchouli, this is the second last month of the year and I'm wrapping it up. This feels very surreal. So I'm going to talk through the stats for my reading for November and then talk about the books themselves. It was a very interesting month. I had a lot going on and there's still a lot trailing into December, but I still read a decent amount. It was just slowly to get off the mark. So let's talk about the stats and then we'll dive into the books. In November, I read 11 books, which equated to 3,353 pages. My average pages per day was 112, which was one of my lower months, not my lowest, but one of my lowest. But my average pages per book was 304. I read 3 books in the hundreds page range, 2 in the 200s, 5 in the 300s, and 1 in the 500s. My average rating was a 4.05, which I think might be my lowest because I had a lot of 4 stars, but also a few lower 3 stars and not too many 5 stars. But I read 1 contemporary, 1 dystopian, 3 fantasy, 1 horror, 2 manga, 1 mystery, 1 non-fiction, and 1 sci-fi. In terms of format, I listened to 3 pure audiobooks, 2 pure ebooks, 1 physical book with no audiobook, and 5 physical audiobook combinations. In terms of age range, I didn't read any middle grade. I read 5 young adult, 3 new adult, and 3 adult titles. In terms of rating, I had 1 3-star, 1 3.5 star, 6 4 stars, 2 4.5s, and 1 5-star. I read 3 books that were a standalone. I started 1 new series. I had 3 books that were continuations. I caught up on 1 series and I did complete 3. My biggest book was As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson, which was 565 pages, and my smallest book was What Feasts at Night by T. Kingfisher, which was 147 pages. And my listening hours was 29.5. It was a very weird reading month. I tried to get through it as much as I could, but it was just a bit more difficult to pick up a book this month, and that's completely fine. As you would have heard, I only read 1 non-fiction, so I am moving Fry's Ties into December. The books themselves, I'll talk about the first 2, which was Soul Eater Volume 4 and Volume 5, and I gave both of these 4 stars. I'm continuing on with the series for Ren and really enjoying the series a lot more. Normally by the time I film these wrap-ups, I've read another couple of volumes, so thank God I haven't done that yet for December. But these were a really interesting arc that we're following and looking at the characters who have been corrupted in some way, and so watching their friendship dynamics and the way that they work together was very surreal. And the end of Volume 5, I was just like, what the fuck is happening? So I know we continue on in Volume 6, so I'm really excited to be able to continue on and see what happens. But yes, this series is definitely becoming a solid, enjoyable, very comforting but gruesome read. Then I read Barbarian Mind by Ruby Dixon, and this was also 4 stars. I quite enjoyed myself. I think I am in on the Ice Planet Barbarian train. I don't need to read anymore for bookish peeps, but I can see myself going to these if I needed a palette cleanser and just a fun, blue, smutty time. I struggled with this particular book with the relationship dynamic between the 2 because their communication was stunted and it wasn't as consensual in having the full scope of information available. But I did appreciate their dynamic when they figured out their shit, and it was very cute to see them sort of come into their own. Then I read The Midnight Girls by Alicia Jaskinska, and oh my god, this was 4 stars. I had so much fun reading this. I remember popping on the audiobook while working on one of my puzzles and just having a really fun time with this. Marinka's character really just made me giggle a lot with her. She reminded me of Spencer from the Skyward series, but in a less intense, more enjoyable way. And I really loved this world and the magic. It was just so fascinating and so immersive to just fall into. It wasn't difficult to follow, and I really liked their dynamics. It is just a really wholesome-ish read, and I had a really fun time with it. Then the stumping block of my non-fiction, I read The Life Worlds by Michael Jackson, Essays in Existential Anthropology, and this took me, this is why I didn't read any other non-fiction, but I am so fucking proud of the fact that I got back into this. So we're looking at different anthropological concepts and the way that we have developed a particular form of anthropology that I can't pronounce because it's literally a word that will not come out. Phenomenological. Take that what you will. And originally I started off with like so many tabs, so many highlights, just having a really fun time with it. And then as I got into the end of it, I was like, okay, I've got my grasp back on these concepts. I don't need to go ham. But there were so many different facets to it that I just had a lovely time going through and really falling back in love with anthropology, because I do have my bachelor's degree with my major in anth. I did a double degree for education and anthropology. It was just so lovely being back. Like, just even opening it up and it's like, universalization may be construed not as a search for truths that hold good for all humankind, but as a desire to make oneself at home in the world, an impulse that is consummated in the kinds of elective affinities and common interests that inform friendships made across cultural, gender, and age lines. What is ethnography if it is not an experiment in working out ways in which we can relate to others whose situations, worldviews, and life strategies are very different from our own? Gah! Just, it was really making my brain tick, and I'm so happy that I read this. I will say I'm going with a 4.5 because it was just, some aspects of it I was like, oh, okay, that was a little on the nose. And being out of the academic world, it took some time. But I did it. I'm so proud. I annotated and tabbed and had a wonderful time. So I'm so happy that this is finally off my TBR and I've done it. And this is like the accomplishment of my life at the moment. So yeah, I had such a wonderful time diving into this and exploring the different essays that Michael presented. Then I read Her Own Happiness by Eden Apaya Kubi and ended up giving this a 3.5. I do owe a lot of credit for this book in potentially coming to the realization of my asexuality, which was a learning experience from this book. There was a particular quote about the freedom from sexual desire. Not that I don't feel it, but it's not like a ruling factor in my brain. I was like, that explains a lot. But the characters weren't the strongest for me and I feel so bad. It's just, it wasn't quite the right book for me. It's a new adult and this girl has lost her career from a fire in Hawaii, and it was all just very self-motivated, and I do understand, like, that is part of it, and coming to understand that there's mental illness at play and things like that. So there was a lot of beautiful conversations in it and a lot of intersectionality that was so fascinating to be able to read. Just my overall frustration with the characters was more heightened than my enjoyment of the story. But also in saying that, I listened to this through the WhisperSync Audible, reading it through the Kindle app, and that was a mistake. So I owe this book my sincerest apologies for listening to it that way. It was horrible. I hated it. That was just the worst thing I could have done, but I needed to listen to something, so I just kept listening, and it definitely did the book a disservice. So I want to caveat that this is, the whole situation did not lend it well to being a higher rating from me, and that's my bad. Then I read The Iron Knight by Julie Kagawa and ended up giving this 4 stars. I really enjoy where we got up to. This was technically the last book in the original I Am Faye quartet, and then we now link into another Call of the Forgotten series, which is also still under this series name. It gets confusing, but anyway, I was very curious to see where this went, because the Iron Knight is a particular key player in the earlier books, so I wanted to know what was happening. I cannot say anything else, but I had a really fun time following these characters, and particularly enjoyed following these characters more so than in the other books. So that was a delightful surprise, and I ended up quite enjoying it. Then I read What Feasts at Night by T. Kingfisher and gave this 5 stars. I love T. Kingfisher, has become a favorite author. I just adore the way that they think and they write. We're continuing with Alex and their return to a particular estate to see that things are happening. And I really appreciated the way that they were dealing with Alex's essentially PTSD and how that situated with the other characters as well. And honestly, it's a vibe. It was a vibe, and it was the perfect thing that I needed to put on. I really just had such an interesting time with it, and I really enjoyed seeing what was at play, because it definitely was an interesting time seeing that develop. So apologies for not going into more details with the series. It's hard. Then I read Only a Monster by Vanessa Len, and I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed this. It surprised me with how much fun I had with it. I really enjoyed seeing Joan's character come into her own, and the way that it was twisted and turny was just, oh! And yeah, I can understand that people might not enjoy this if you're going in looking for high epic fantasy sort of vibes. It definitely does lean more in the YA, but it was just, yeah. I had a grand time with it, and it caught me by surprise. I knew that from reading the like little blurbs that there was a lot of things that I enjoy in it, especially having it from the monster's perspective, and her coming into her own was very interesting with that. There is a lot of throw you in, and there was a little bit of info dumping, but honestly I would forgive it because she really has no knowledge, and the time travel aspect of it really appealed to me. So it was such an interesting, delightful read, and I had a glorious time, and I am genuinely so excited to continue on with the series. There have been a few series that I've started this year that have just caught me by surprise with how much I love them. So this was one of them, and I am very happy about that fact. Then I read Fall by Veronica Roth, and this was a collection in the Divergent series, and made me want to reread the series, that's for sure. Ended up giving this 4 stars. I just really enjoyed seeing from Fall's perspective. It's following him as he goes throughout his time and growing from his choosing ceremony to meeting with Tris, and it just gave me the right vibes. It was glorious. I'm glad that I've read it. It ticked off finishing off that series, not that it was on my series spreadsheet, but it's still another one completed, and I really enjoyed it. It was really nice being back in this world. So 4 stars, a solid good time. And then the last book that I read was As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson, and I gave this 3 stars. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I will probably rip to shreds on the BookStara live show, and I apologize in advance to my co-host for that, but I did not enjoy this as much as the other 2 at all. Pip, I understand, is dealing with a lot, but after the end of the last one there should be mandated therapy sessions. There was not, and because of that I was banging my head against a brick wall for the majority of this book, and it was a chunky monkey. So that was great. It was definitely one of those that I'm glad that I've read the series and have concluded it, but I do also think I went in with lowered expectations because I had heard that the 3rd book wasn't most people's favorite. So I know that I'm biased in that regard, but honestly, I was done. I was very happy. I think I was not even halfway through the book and I was like, can I please DNF this? And I know that I could for BookStara, but I also would want to finish it to be able to contribute to the discussion, having the full knowledge of the story. So that's where I ended up with that one. And yeah, the series has been interesting because of the first book having for me to suspend my disbelief for the twist was a kicker, and then we're just following some interesting twists and turns that by the time I got to this 3rd book I was ready to just suspending my belief. I was done. I was tired of having to do it. I just wish that it was pushed in a way that was more realistic, and so unfortunately I didn't vibe with it as much as I would have liked to. I still think the story was interesting, like there are so many aspects of it that we're following. It's just my own personal preference that there are elements to it that I was just like, oh, for fuck's sake. So that was where my sticking point was. This was my little stack that I had of physical books. I really didn't have many that were in my hands, but that's completely fine. I am so proud of the things that I did read, even though it wasn't the most highest reading month in terms of rating. I am happy to continue on and just see what else is out there. But I did have some lovely surprises and feeling very confident in myself in the books that I did read as well. So with that, let me know in the comments, what glorious reads did you have in November? Was there anything that just stuck out to you as an amazing all-time favorite? I'm just genuinely so surprised by Only a Monster and very happy that I have got to read that as well as my triumphant of getting through Life Worlds. So like I said, feel free to leave anything you want to let me know in the comments down below, and if you like this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more of this mess, feel free to subscribe. I'll hopefully see you on my next video. Bye!